This is a video about making pear butter, which is a wonderful thing to make, and I'd forgotten how much I liked it. I picked these pears from the tree in our yard. It bears just an insane amount of pears every year. And you'll notice I have two little apples that came from some apple trees also in our supposed orchard. They were just hanging there, and I was like, oh, I've never seen apples on those two trees before. Anyway, the pears have been sitting around. I've got them in a single layer. I forgot to put them in the refrigerator overnight. I didn't do that this time. I wonder if it'll make a difference. But cleaning them means putting them into a sink full of cool water with a lot of baking soda. So I put probably, I don't know, a quarter cup of baking soda in there. Okay, and I'm just going to dump the pears in there and rub it around and take out any that have already begun to rot. And I picked these hard. They did have some blush on them, but they were hard. None of them were firm at the tip end. And you see that one is already rotting. So that just goes to show you that pears ripen from the inside out, and you can think that they're not ripe yet, and they're already too ripe. Some of these may be rotten on the inside, and I can't tell, and I'll need to toss those out as well. So we'll see. All right, well, I'm going to start cutting up these pears, and I don't know what I'm going to find when I cut into them. I've got a big pan of them that I've washed, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I have 7 that had rot on them. I'll show you the worst. The worst one looked like that, and the rest look much like this. I may be able to get half a pear out of that. It just depends on what the middle looks like. I'm sorry you can't see the top of my head, but I don't think the top of my head matters much. I really want you to see what I'm doing. Now these are still, see, that's still firm. But they're a little soft on the outside. I have hopes for this batch. So it's looking pretty good. The nice thing about this process is I can take this and put it straight in my pot. Now I have a great big stainless steel pot. You don't want to use aluminum with any type of fruit. But I've put this stainless steel pot with just the teeniest layer of water in the bottom. Like that might be half cup of water, maybe a little more for a lot of fruit. Because the fruit has its own water, you really just want enough in there that it doesn't burn before it starts releasing its water. Now see here, this is a beautiful color. If you can see that, it's really turning yellow. That's a nice large pear. I'm so hopeful that this one will be nice in the middle. Let's see. Ooh, it's much softer. Okay, now let's look in the middle of this one. You see, it was beautiful on the outside. You see how it's already starting. It's not rotting in the middle yet, but it's just, that's pretty close. I'll probably keep a spoon nearby so that I can scoop out any centers that don't look great. Let me cut this one again and see what I think about that. I think I'm going to cut out some of the middle of that one. It's very soft, but there's still a lot of beautiful flesh on that one. Now the goal is to cook down, this is just like making applesauce. If you've ever made applesauce this way, you're going to cook down this fruit until it is just pulp and skin and seeds, and then you're going to put it through a food mill to remove the skin and seeds, and you'll just have the pulp left. It's boiling hot, so it's, I think this one's nice and firm. I think what I really want, this is the thing, is there's a little bit of a gritty graininess to pear butter as opposed to apple butter, and that's because in order not to have rotten fruit, you kind of have to process it when it's really still firm, and I think that's where that gritty, grainy texture comes from. Not everybody likes that. I really prefer apple butter, but I think apples can be even more bland than pears. I don't know. I'm going to put a lot of spices into this. Now here's an interesting pear. It just had a little bit of darkness on the bottom, so I went ahead and cut it open. And actually, the inside is fine except for just that bottom. So I'm just going to cut that off and use that. So it's worth investigating each pear. That's another reason why this is a good process. You just cut them in quarters. but it allows you to see the inside. The pears that I'm tossing in this pot are already starting to yellow, to brown when I put them in there. They're starting to oxidize, so it is important also to cut your pears and cook them right away. All right, well, this is exciting. I think that these will work. Well, I'll go ahead and chop these up and put them in, and we'll speed up the video, okay? Okay, it's important to put the lid on because you want the steam in there. So I'm turning this down to like just medium. I don't want anything to burn. I'm going to turn this, but there's increasing liquid on the bottom at this point. And so I don't think it'll burn as long as I stir it some. You can see, honestly, it's too full to stir right now. But the steam inside of there is what's going to soften. It's going to heat up really hot. That's what steam does better than anything else. And it's going to get the flesh really hot, and it's just going to kind of pop those pears, just like it does with apples if you've made applesauce. The difference between applesauce and apple butter, or pear sauce and pear butter, is just evaporation. It's just the length of time that you cook it in your crock pot and remove the moisture. There's no butter in it, okay, which is so surprising to me when I first learned it. So I am going to cook this down, and I've got a lot more pears to process, probably at least that much again. And I'll put it all through my food mill and put it in the crock pot, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Now I went to make another video and left these things on the stove, and they are definitely starting to soften. It takes longer to do pears, I think, than it does apples, so I'm going to put a little bit more water in the bottom and put the top back on them and let them keep on cooking. Alright, so my pears are still bubbling away, and while they're doing that, I wanted to show you what I mean by a food mill. Some of you already know this, so you can ignore this part. I use this is a food mill, and I used this for a lot of years. I think I bought mine new, I think I bought it in Iowa, I'm not sure. But it used to be kind of hard to find something like this. You put the fruit in here that you've softened, you know, when cooking, and you can put the skins in there and the stems in there and the seeds in there, and then you rotate this and it scrapes it through that mesh in the bottom, and it even has some little legs that help it sit on top of the bowl, and then all that you have come out on the bottom underneath into the bowl is the pulp, the juices in the pulp, which is what you want to make an applesauce or an apple butter or a pear. And then I had seen one of these, then I found one at the thrift store. This is in really good shape, okay? They call this a sieve, a fruit sieve maybe, I don't know, but it works just like a food mill because it also has those little holes. I prefer this one because I find it easier to clean. It also has this wooden cone, and you put the fruit in there and you just rotate it around and you set it over top of a bowl and it goes in. So it's really the same process. You're just doing this. I find this to be a pain. I don't like the sound of it either. It's also, you have to, it has a little scrapey pin on the bottom right there and a little screw and stuff, and you have to take all that apart in order to wash it, which is important. And as I get older, my thumbs and my hands are really, really sore and can't grip things and can't turn things. So getting this off and on again is hard for my little hands. So I find this altogether more pleasant. It's your pick. But this is a great way to take really any fruit. The first time I saw this, an elderly lady that I knew in Iowa brought me a whole box of Concord grapes from her property. Bless her heart, she was the sweetest lady. Norma, I think was her name. And she brought me this box and said, here, do you want some grapes? Turn it into jelly or something. And I'd never really done anything like that before. And then, I don't know if she did or somebody else lent me this to process the grapes with, and you can just, put them in there. I guess I cooked them first. I really don't remember. And then you just turn it, and it brings all the grape juice out and leaves all the skins and seeds in the top. Again, same process. If you have room in your kitchen, which I don't, but I do keep these things because they're important to me for doing apples and for doing pears. I don't think I do any, and tomatoes. Oh my goodness, if you want to make your own tomato paste, I'll have to do that sometime if I get enough tomatoes. We don't have tomatoes this year really. But this is great also because tomatoes are also a fruit, and if you want to take the seeds and the skins out and be left with the pulp and cook it down in a crock pot, that's a great way to make your own tomato paste. I've got blog posts on all these things, but I don't have YouTube videos on them, so we'll work on that. Okay, see how much it's been cooking down? Now they're really soft, getting really mushy. Some of them are very mushy, and some of them are still hard because they need to get down into the bottom. So that's another reason it's important to stir. This is one of those time-consuming things. I don't think of it as time-consuming. I think of it as something I can do when I'm doing something else. So if I want to go knit, or I want to go, weave, or if I want to go outside and work with chickens or whatever, as long as I don't let it burn down and forget about it. That's also important. But you see how much that's reduced. It used to be up to the top, and now it's gone down. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, we're going to let it go. This may really be a bit of an all-day project, and that's fine with me. And I've got that just below medium heat. I'll add here that now that there's lots of liquid in this pot, once a good many of the pears have started to soften, they've released their liquid. And once there's a lot of liquid in the pot, I can turn the heat up, and that increases the steam. But you really cannot put this through your food mill until all of the fruit is very soft and basically coming off of the skin. You can hear it bubbling away. Okay, this is about as reduced as I'm going to do it. If I end up with any hard chunks in there that haven't softened, I can always leave them in the pot and include them with the next batch. So it's not a big deal. So I'm going to move this as close as I can. I've turned off the fire. The other thing I like about this is I can freestand it above this bowl. I've even got a Pyrex bowl under here, so you can measure your pulp and juice as you put it in there, which is also handy. And I've got a towel underneath there to keep everything nice and stable. And there's really a lot of liquid here. I might actually move to a soup later. Be interesting to see. How much the pulp goes through. It's actually quite a bit. It looks a lot like applesauce. Some of these look like they could cook a little bit longer. We'll see how they do. I'll move this around so I'm not going to have my arm in the way. And it's just, you can do a nice gentle, you don't have to hurt yourself doing this. It doesn't take a lot of muscle. It doesn't take muscle, it takes time. That's okay, because time is what I've got. Yeah, this is going to work well. And you do this until you've got all the pulp out and everything that's left in there is just dry. And then you can just dump it in the trash. Or actually what I'll probably do is give it to my chickens. They might really like that. A little bit of pressure on this really does shove any of the pulp that, wasn't total mush. It'll go ahead and soften if it was anywhere inclined to be softened by the pressure of this. And even though this, you may think, oh, that looks like a lot of trouble, but to me, there is nothing that's more trouble than peeling fruit and cutting the core out of fruit. That is enough that it just turns me off of wanting to make applesauce or pear sauce, pear butter, all those things, even processing tomato. Oh, if you had to do that with tomatoes, can you imagine? But that's what people do, is they actually, they'll put tomatoes in hot water to get the peel off, that kind of thing. It's really unnecessary. Okay, so let me show you. Oh, this is the other thing that's helpful to do, is the outside of this is going to get a beautiful accumulation. Normally I don't have to pull this out like this, but I want to show you what it looks like, and I can show you how to do this too. You can just scrape this off. I only ever do this at the end, really. Okay, so this is what this looks like on the inside. Getting pretty dry, not a lot left in there. I can throw that straight in the trash. And let me show you the results that you get. Look at that beautiful pear sauce. Nothing but pear. There's no, you take out all the seeds, you take out all of the skin. This is lovely. This is the result that you want. And I got all of that. That is 3 cups of pulp and a little bit of liquid in there. And I haven't even finished this first pot of cut pears. So I'm going to go ahead and probably, I think I'll just give this to chickens. That way it's not wasted at all. Wonderful. Okay, so I'll catch you back up with this after I've processed all this. Okay, I've finished that first pot full of pears, and this is what my crock pot looks like. It's pretty full. I don't know if I can fit all of it, honestly, in one crock pot full. But now I'm going to start on these pears here, and I also have some over here that I'm going to cut up, and they'll all go in the pot, and we'll start the process all over again. Here's a great example of how a pear rots from the inside out. This is a rather pretty pear. It's starting to yellow. It's got this funky spot here, and I didn't really notice this as a bruise, as a rotten spot, because I saw this first. So I was going to process this, but when I cut it, this is what I found. You can see that the rotting had come out this way, but it started in the center of the fruit. And you can see how there's still good flesh on the outside, and you can see the reason why. On the outside, that looks like a perfectly pretty pear. But on the inside, you find this. So this is a pear I won't be using. Okay, so here's my crock pot. One of those nice big oval ones. I did grate the zest of a whole orange in there, and then I squeezed the juice of half of the orange in there. I don't want too much added liquid because I'm going to be trying to take the liquid out. I put probably about 3/4 of a cup of sugar in there, and a teaspoon of salt. And then this is the spices. Now I wanted to do this before I stirred it in so you could see how much spice I'm putting in. This is all the cinnamon. Oh my goodness, I guess that's probably several tablespoons. It might even be a 1/4 cup. The dark one right here, this is cloves. I'd say that's probably about a tablespoon, maybe not quite. And this is allspice. We grind our own allspice here, and that's probably at least a teaspoon of allspice. And then I grated some whole nutmeg in there. We always just use whole nutmeg, and we have this. So let me show you the little grater I use. I use this to do the orange zest, and then I also used it to grate this. Although we grind our allspice, it's too small to grate, of course. Okay, so this is really, I think that's all the ingredients. I'm going to taste it for more sugar, more salt. After it's cooked down, I had this set on high, and to make pear butter or apple butter, you really have to get it very, very hot. You never put a lid on it because you want evaporation. You get it very hot for the first hour. After it really warms up, you leave it on for an hour, then you turn it down to low, and you let it cook off for about 10 hours or overnight. Although I like to do it during the day so I can stir it. Although I did do it overnight and forgot it one time, and it did not burn because it's in a crock pot, so that helps. Okay, doesn't that look nice? But it's going to be thicker than that. This is really the consistency of pear sauce, like applesauce, and I want something that's much more spreadable on like an English muffin. That would be wonderful. Okie dokie, we're continuing with our pear butter. Let me show you what it looks like. It's been, okay, what time is it? Almost 3:30. This pear butter has been cooking on mostly on high. I'm really trying to get it evaporated and get it thick. I don't know, so I've been doing this for 6 hours. So let's look and see what it looks like. All right, you can see it's nice and dark, and that's not just the spices. It really does get darker as it cooks down, and it'll be a lovely dark brown color. I don't think that's quite thick enough when I test it. I mean, I really want it thicker, like an apple butter. Although apple butters in the grocery store really vary in texture as well. That's too hot to stick in my mouth. All right, so let's look at what we've got over here. This is the remainder. Can you see that? Here's one batch from the pot, and here's the other batch. This one I've put sugar and salt into. This one I have not. Even the sugar seems to make a difference. I had a little taste of that. It's delicious as well. Both of these are going to go in the crock pot, and that's going to fill it up for a big second batch. So I want to take a second to talk about this. Because it is heating in a crock pot, it is not as hot as jams or jellies that you would make on a stovetop, where you have 8 cups of strawberries and 5 cups of sugar, or vice versa, whichever one it is, and you put it in a pot and you bring it to a hot boil. That's blazing hot. You can put a jam or a jelly like that into a sterilized mason jar and put a lid and a band on it, turn it upside down for about 20 minutes, and it will seal on its own. I don't have that much confidence in this because it's not as hot. So I'm going to do a full hot water bath, and let me show you what that requires. Now, a few years ago, I cleaned out my hoarder's collection of mason jars because, every time I'd see a good one at the thrift store, I would buy it, and I had dozens and dozens and dozens of quart size, pint size, and half pint. So these are pint size jars. I have 12 of them. This is all I have left, really. I have a few that I use for odds and ends in the refrigerator, but these are my canning ones. And I've got lids. You can get these little lids just about anywhere these days. Another thing that's really helpful to have is something like this, because you're going to reach into this boiling water. This is my sterilizing water, and you're going to want to be able to reach in there and grab these bands and bring them out. And you don't want to burn yourself. All the little implements I'm about to show you keep you from burning yourself. And so these have been sterilized. There's just enough water in here for me to roll these jars around and get them sterilized, and then I'll pull them out as well. And then they'll all be ready to go. This again is kind of time consuming and fiddly. None of it's hard. It's a good thing to do on a day when you have to stay home anyway, or want to stay home anyway. Don't have anything else particularly big planned. So I just take the jar like this. Just keeps that boiling water far, far, far from my little fingers. And I just roll it around. I'll probably leave it in there for 2 minutes, and then I'm about done. Pull it out, turn it upside down. I'll do all 12 of those jars. I'll add that it's important to use jars like mason jars that are intended for canning, not just any old jar that looks like a pint, like a peanut butter jar or something. That can be disastrous. This is my hot water bath. This is a really tall pot. And I've sacrificed years ago one of my trivets that it's just metal, it doesn't have any rubberized bottom. And I put it in the bottom of there so that my jars don't sit directly on the bottom of the pan, but they're raised up a little bit. The other thing you're going to want, or that is useful, you don't have to get this. This is a wonderful device for putting your hot jam or butter or whatever you're going to do, whatever you're going to can, into these jars, because it's a perfect fit. And you can spoon it into here. It also keeps the lip of your jar clean, which is really important later. So let me get this dude out of here. He's sounding like he's ready. All right. The other thing I think you're going to want is this little implement. This is great for grabbing a jar. Has this nice little gripper thing on the bottom that's just the right size for grabbing a jar, like this one that I just had so hot. If you can imagine there being a band on there, this is what you use to get your jar out of the hot water bath without burning yourself. It's really, really useful. I would encourage anybody who intends to do any amount of canning to go ahead and invest in some of these things, you can spoon your hot jam into your jars if you want to, but you can make a real big mess and you can end up burning yourself. And you can drop your jars into the sterilizing water and try to get them out with a spoon. Again, you can really burn yourself. As far as getting your jars out of a hot water bath, you really need something like this. There's not really anything else that's good for that, except for something like this. Okay, and I need to be careful about using all 12 of my only 12 pint-sized jars, because I have a whole tree full of figs out there, and I want to make fig preserves as well. And if I have to end up putting them in my quart-sized jars, I'm going to be in a pickle. Not to be so punny, but yeah. So I may have to wrestle up. Maybe I won't need all 12 of these, but maybe I will. That's a lot of pear butter. See you in a bit. Well, I cooked this second batch overnight on low, and I'm still cooking it this morning. It's reduced by almost 2 inches, I think. And look how dark it's getting. I mean, I think the video is not showing quite the color. Look at that. And it's thickened up a good bit. And look what I'm going to do with it this morning. I think it's still, to me, it's still a little runnier than I'd like for an apple butter, but I don't know how much more reduced I'll be able to get. But I think, sorry about that big glop. Doesn't that look good? Okay, I want you to see, as the last little bit on this pear butter video, the difference between pear butter that was cooked for about 6 hours on high in the crock pot and pear butter that was cooked overnight. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I didn't measure the spices I put in. And the spicing does taste, I think, better or stronger in this. And so part of the color difference could be more spices, but I am not convinced that that's the main cause of the difference. I really do think it's the length of time that they were cooked. So I have, look at this, 9 jars of beautiful, delicious pear butter to enjoy for the next year. I'm so excited. You know how many pears are on that tree out there? It's probably enough to make 10 times this much. That's too much work. But thanks for sticking with me through this long endeavor, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Okay, so here is the final word on the pear butter. This is fascinating. Okay, so I made this huge batch of pear butter, and I am, as I showed you earlier, I'm having it for breakfast. A little late because I was watching the women's gymnastics on the Olympics. And this is wonderful. And the blog post that I originally did, I didn't check the year, probably 2 or 3 years ago. I also said that the flavor was fabulous, surprisingly fabulous. Okay. It tastes like, it just tastes like a really good homemade apple butter. Lots of spices. The pears are really just a carrier fruit for the spices, okay? But the blog post I wrote back then, I wrote it on July 11th. At that point, I had already made the pear butter, and I also had picked the fruit and let it rest in the refrigerator for 24 hours and then rest in the spare bedroom for a week. So I must have picked those pears in early July, the 2nd or the 3rd, something like that. These pears, today's the 27th of July. And I guess I picked them and let them ripen for about 5 days. Anyway, I think these pears had about another 2 to 3 weeks on the tree, and that has made a difference in their texture. The grainy texture that I detected last time, that I felt like, even though the flavor was great, the texture was just, I thought it was because they were pears, because pears have that. Even if you bite into a ripe pear, there's this little bit of pebbly texture in there that you don't get in other fruits. And it's gone. It's gone. So I think they just needed more ripening. And this is an important thing to remember. So if I make this again, and it is a lot of work, as you saw in the video, it really is a full day of work. So it's worth doing if it keeps you from buying other stuff, and if you really love homemade, and if you enjoy canning, which I do still. Don't do a lot of it. I may give some of this away, especially if I just get tired of eating it. But boy, in my opinion, this is worth doing if you have the stuff to can and you like to can. And if you have access to a pear tree, which sometimes they're the neglected fruit trees that people have in their yards, and they bear fruit and they just don't do anything with it because, like, oh, it's pears and they're rotten and falling in the ground and I don't want to bother. If you know somebody with a pear tree, give it a try. I literally picked these pears within 5 or 10 minutes. I had 2 big bags, okay? 5 or 10 minutes, and then it took me a full day, nearly 24 hours to cross me today. All right, enough yapping. But thanks so much for joining me. I don't do a lot of cooking, but when I do it big. See you later.